What is P.E.S.T Talks?
What is P.E.S.T Talks?
What is P.E.S.T Talks?
It's where leaders from all corners of the pest control world
come together to have continuous conversations on trending topics.
Sure, our views may not all be the same,
but the passion that we have is what brings us all together.
P.E.S.T Talks is pest control, expertise, experience,
entertainment, social networking,
social media, and trending topics coupled with technology.
Listen in and join the conversation
from a pest management professional's perspective.
Hello, Pest Ops. This is Jay. And what a great episodic trending topic we have today. And it's simply entrepreneurs versus intrapreneurs. And do you think society pushes one path more than the other? So the first thing is, I think either you have an entrepreneur mindset or you don't. You know, those people that are real entrepreneurs think different. Oftentimes they are creative people, right-brained people. They look at obstacles in a way that others see it as the end of the road, but a real entrepreneur sees it as just another hurdle to cross, and it's going to make the product, the system, the company even better. And so I think you either have it or you don't. I don't believe you can read it out of a book or you can be taught how to be an entrepreneur. Sure, there are great classes from some of the most prestigious colleges across the country that can teach you economics, finances, how to run a company. But until you're in it, until you make the payroll, until you're dealing with the IRS, until you're dealing with accountants and lawyers and customers and then hired employees, you really don't get it. And so that would be my first take, number one. I get asked a lot of times about entrepreneurship, and it's what advice would you give? And so in thinking about our topic today, our episodic training topic, I think the first piece of advice I usually give people, I ask them just simply, do you really want to do this? And so, oh yeah, I've dreamed about it forever, and I've just always wanted to do this. And then I'll say, but do you really want to do it? Because there's a difference in having a hobby and having a business. And a lot of people have hobbies that they want to turn into businesses, but they really don't understand what comes with that. There's a lot of long nights, a lot of stress, a lot of heartache, a lot of headache, a lot of tears. And so most people do not see that. They do not realize that as they go down that road. And so I usually ask people that are true entrepreneurs, do you really want to do it? Because you got to be prepared. You got to have strong shoulders, just to trailblaze a path when there is no path sometimes. Entrepreneurship is a really great concept. I don't think it's a bad thing. Anytime you have employees that buy in so much to your system that they run it as if their own, they care about it just as if it was their own baby, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, I do think you're going to see more and more entrepreneurship happen across the country for a couple of reasons. One, banks are not loaning money like they used to. Two, interest rates when they do loan, they're so high. You could get an SBA loan, 30-year loan, but at that 30 years, a lot can happen in 30 years. That's a long time to be nailed down to a payment, a long time to really try to get some capital to make your dreams come alive. Sometimes it's the only way, and that's okay. But I think you're going to see more and more people, more and more entrepreneurs that have worked really hard, and they're going to get an owner finance deal. And that's not a bad thing at all. In fact, I would argue that's the best thing for someone that really wants to start something up or take over the reins of something. And so I think you're going to see more and more entrepreneurship as time goes by. Being an entrepreneur myself, I've thought about my own life experience and how I got to where I am today to be able to talk to you. And it's a little bit of both of those.
If you were like me and you thought to yourself, I know what entrepreneurship is, but what is intrapreneurship? So I'm going to give you a textbook definition of what it means if you don't already know. Entrepreneurship involves creating and running an independent venture, taking on full financial risk and reward, while intrapreneurship involves an employee developing new ideas, products, or services within an existing organization, using company resources and carrying less personal financial risk. Intrapreneurship is huge for several different reasons. I really think it gives employees that space to have a culture where they can feel like they can generate and develop new thoughts, new services, something to keep that company fresh, right? Like innovation. To me, intrapreneurship just stems from innovation. It's a huge win for companies, right? Like when you allow your employees to feel like they have room to be themselves, to share something that maybe nobody thought of. If you think about it, when you're in a room of, say, 50 people, you are bringing 50 new ideas, 50 new possibilities, 50 new outcomes, 50 new risks, 50 new rewards. I think at the end of the day, that's worth it, in my opinion, because you are allowing your people, even if you can't implement that idea or that innovative thought, you are still listening to them, right? And you're still hearing them out and letting them know that they are still adding value, even if there's no financial reward, or if it doesn't actually flourish. I think just giving people that space to use what we have as companies and our resources and letting them try something new. I think at the end of the day, that is more of a reward for the company culture. I know in my generation, I'm a Gen Z, and that is something that gratitude and company culture and being able to give intrapreneurship for your employees to flourish and feel like they are being seen go so much further than maybe an actual business model or a service where you're only getting one thought out of a room of 50 people and just running with that because it's something that you know is going to guarantee success. Having an entrepreneur spirit and innovation is going to go so far at the end of the day long term. As pest control experts and professionals and educators and writers of this industry and creating history and documenting it, showing the evolution of this industry and what we are trying to do to evolve with the generations is huge. As a society, I think there's more encouragement and more support and spirit around entrepreneurship. There's always risk and reward to everything you do. It's a matter of what you feel drives your purpose.
Amanda, loved your take on this topic. And Jay, you guys both came from different perspectives. One of you guys is an entrepreneur in pest control, and one of you are an intrapreneur in the pest control industry. And both of you guys gave amazing takes. I do love how you said, Amanda, that your purpose definitely should have value in it so that whatever you're doing, you bring all the value to it because eventually your purpose will come from who you are. So that's kind of what I took from that. I believe personally that a person in life probably is more entrepreneurship only because everyone at some point is most likely going to work for somebody. But that doesn't mean that somebody has to start working for somebody, right? At some point, most people would have a job when they're just getting started. And that would start being employed, which could have the possibility of entrepreneurship, which means you're taking said company you're working for to another level, or you're being promoted because the company is finding extreme value in you. Entrepreneurship, it does happen. People start out the gate by starting their own thing after they've worked for somebody for a while, or they've had this desire and they're probably going on that. I think both are needed because an entrepreneur that has a business, you can't grow a business without people that are working for you. And then you can't really get to the next level if you don't have good people that are going to kind of take on the company's culture. I think they kind of bleed into one another. I think society pushes one path more than the other. Me personally, I think that they push employment more, which leads to entrepreneurship because I think there may be more people employed with a W-2 as opposed to somebody that owns their own business. Again, these are all stats that I need to look up. A person choosing one or the other is their personal choice. Me and my wife starting Get Going's Pest Control, a foundation, and some other entities. What drove us to do that? I definitely worked for a couple different pest control companies within my family. And I would say that there was motivation to do my own thing. And when we're pregnant, that was another incentive to say, hey, I need to do something for my family. So those were initial drives. And then, seeking God was the most important thing, obviously. But the whole point is that was my purpose. Everybody that I worked for, I really gave it my all. There was value there, but there was always something that came up to where it was like, maybe the entrepreneur in me was like, nah, you're destined to do this and to be an entrepreneur.
When nobody can fix the problem that is going on within your company, as an entrepreneur, you're the person that has to fix it. If nobody else can fix it and it's a big problem, you have to fix it. It can be fun, but the buck stops with you. Whether it's making money and not making money, figuring something out, improving the system, there's a lot that falls on you. I think recently, I feel like it's been cool to be an entrepreneur. But again, going back to what Jay was saying, a lot of sleepless nights or nights where you don't get good sleep, you're up late, you're trying to figure things out, you don't know what's going to work. There's a lot of that. And there's a lot of that even when you break through and you have success. I've had years where I've had tremendous success. I've had some years where, I was working, 10 times as hard as I was in the successful years, and I still wasn't getting any traction. Right now, it's cool to be an entrepreneur. It's cool to own your own business because when COVID and you had that influx of money coming in, and I think you're seeing a different side right now. The people who really want to own businesses right now really want to own businesses. They want to be in that space for the most part. It takes a lot to be here. It can be a lonely path. Entrepreneurs are built different. You look at problems differently. You need both sides. You need somebody who's going to be crazy enough to take the risk and deal with a crisis and still be able to go to work and function and lead their team and keep making progress. And you need somebody who is within the system, making the system work and helping evolve the nuances and details without all the risks that, you know, entrepreneur may have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, mentally, financially, physically, and spiritually, all that. I think there's a lot of reasons why one person may choose one over another. For me personally, I've always been fascinated with owning my own businesses. It's something I've been doing from a very young age. I started my first little business when I was 10. You know, I had a landscaping company. I did the whole neighborhood, trimming bushes, cutting grass, raking leaves in the fall, shoveling snow. I grew up in the Midwest. I worked at car washes. It just always fascinated me with the ability to create and build something and solve a problem. You can't be an entrepreneur that effectively without having entrepreneurs within your business. Yeah, I think it's one of the most powerful things of building a great business as an entrepreneur is having people that can solve complex problems and they can go out and creatively think about how to solve those problems without necessarily having to ask that owner about every suggestion or idea that they have and seeking approval. So I think both sides are very important and they're needed. You know, everything that we have today in America in terms of the infrastructure, the cars, the transportation, great pest control companies, a lot of these things have come from great entrepreneurs and great entrepreneurs. The great entrepreneurs a lot of times get a ton of credit for executing on something extraordinary, but what a lot of people do not see is they have incredible entrepreneurs behind them that get the wheels turning and make sure things get executed.
Ryan, what a valid point, man. You spoke about most people starting off as an entrepreneur and eventually becoming an entrepreneur, right? For those people who started as entrepreneurs and eventually moved on to entrepreneurship, what was the thing that pushed you to become an entrepreneur instead of working for a company? And me being an entrepreneur, you know, there are a ton of reasons where I choose to be an entrepreneur rather than an entrepreneur.
All you guys that went before me, valid point, great perspective. Loved all of it. Amanda, thank you for giving us the book definition of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. And you also had a lot of great nuggets in what you were saying, especially in regard to whatever you're doing, do it with purpose. Jay, also a lot of great point, how expensive it is with your time and things like that. So I do agree with you. We might see a slowdown in terms of entrepreneurship. We might end up having more of entrepreneurship because of the cost that comes with building your own brand, building your own business. Ryan, valid points again on both fronts, the important part that entrepreneur and entrepreneur plays in the success of a business. Alex, you also talked about those. I think one of the main reasons that society pushes entrepreneurship more versus entrepreneurship, one of the number one reason is the staggering rate that even though we live in a country where that was built on the back of business and entrepreneurship, the staggering rate that businesses fail on a yearly basis in this country is insane. The last time I read it, it was definitely over 50% of new business that are started will fail. Within the first year, over 50% of them will fail. It is easier to build up on something somebody else already start than for you to go out and start your own. And also your chances of success is higher because it's already a proven concept. And there's a cheaper cost to get into it. So that's the reason you have a higher number of people that chooses to be entrepreneur versus entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is not for everybody. Sometimes it just comes to you naturally. You were born that way. Most, if not all, successful company you see out here is because there was an entrepreneur who decided to start it, but there was multiple entrepreneurs who helped build it and make it successful. So to me, both are needed, both are important. And sometimes there are entrepreneurs that plays a more pivotal role to the success of some companies than the entrepreneur themselves. Yes, they took the initial risk to start it, but someone came and saw the dream, believed the dream, and took it and run with it and make it successful.
I believe society as a whole is designed to keep you in line. The gems and nuggets or precious stones have to be mined from the mind in order to find, right? Business education does not start or end in school or a program. So they are both great positions to have, right? Some people enjoy leading and some people enjoy being led. Like sometimes if I'm gaming or something like that, the open world concept is good depending on what I'm trying to do. But then a lot of times I like something that's a little more structured, right? So that's kind of like the two in comparison, where there's a mission I have to finish or complete in order to get to where I need to go. Otherwise, the open world, I'll be just kind of running around for days. There's a thin line, I think, between the two. Entrepreneurs do have a certain drive that allows them to endure challenges. Those same challenging experiences are shared with entrepreneurs as well. Ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever path you take, I do believe you are working on yourself for yourself. It doesn't matter what entity or how you see it. Sometimes you are looking at it from one perspective to the other, but I think everyone is really just kind of working on their brand. Even though you may be an entity inside of an entity or a brand, you are doing it for yourself, for your livelihood, for your family. So it can be treated the same, but it can have a somewhat different motive or meaning for some. Again, some people just like the outline where it's just kind of laid out for them. And then others, they spontaneously think outside the box. They don't want to be kept inside of a box where they have to follow the P&P, so to speak, right? The protocol and procedures. I definitely think that they are both wonderful. For me, entrepreneurship all day, every day.
I work within a company. I am entrusted to be a leader within this company that I work for. One of my jobs is to help us reach certain goals and get to certain levels. And I enjoy that. I enjoy being a part of a good company. I enjoy reaching a goal with people that I came up with. I've only worked in this industry for one company. It's really cool to be able to accomplish a goal with people that you just came up with, right? And over time, you start seeing people get promotions and you start seeing people do all these great things. And it's so cool to be able to accomplish those goals and celebrate each other because we've known each other for so long. When you are an intrapreneur, the heavy risks that's associated with owning a business really doesn't apply to you. It all comes back to me being able to achieve these goals within myself and also for the company. To answer the second part of that trending topic, do I think society pushes one more than the other? I really like what Ash said. It is easier for people to be entrepreneurs and not take that step and take that leap. Like I mentioned before, there is a lot of risk that comes with starting a business and owning a business. That's not really taught all the way. Like, how do you start a business? That's not really taught, unless obviously you go to business school and all that. But I think from an early age, I wasn't being taught life lessons that I would face as an adult. I wasn't really taught about credit, and I wasn't really taught about where I could take my life if I deviated from a certain path. So I do think that in certain situations, you are taught to follow the status quo. But I think we are in a society now where people can make money doing this. People can make money talking to a screen. People can make money having a vlog. So I think the thought of entrepreneurship is more out there now. You talk to any kid these days, what do you want to be when you grow up? I remember when I was asked that question, I wanted to be an architect at first, and then I wanted to be on Broadway. But you ask a kid that question now, they want to be a streamer, they want to be a gamer, they want to be a TikTok influencer. So yeah, things are changing. Things are changing for sure.
Toby wanted to say hi to P.E.S.T Talks. Hi, Toby. Okay. Go sit in your seat. I kind of agree with David. I never really thought that entrepreneurship was something that it was pushed back when I was younger. But now, on social media, seeing everybody just kind of picking up and doing the gaming, like David was saying, or the influencer, whether they're selling even services on social media now. Entrepreneurship is so much more achievable, I feel like, in the young generation's eyes because of what they're seeing on social media, that it's just so different from back in the day. But I think about it in, the sense of our industry and, where I'm at in my company. And it's makes me think about, over 4 generations, 100 years in business, we wouldn't be where we were or where we are today if it wasn't for the entrepreneurs in our company. And, I have a colleague that's been with us for 36 years and 20 years and 15 years, and they have really helped shape who we are today. And so Evans was saying, and Jay and David, the company wouldn't be where it's at without all those people helping the entrepreneur get to where they are. So I think that's super important how they each have their own lane, but without them working together, it wouldn't be as successful as it is. I think Jay said this, it's people are kind of born with that intuition in them. Like, I remember when I was a little kid, I used to have like lemonade stands, and I would make jewelry and handmade cards, and I would walk around my neighborhood and I would knock on doors and I would ask people if they would want to buy them. And like, I even as a young kid, I made up a game with some friends, and it was called Hawaiian Horizon, and it was like a made up hotel. We had members and a whole layout and all of the services, and we would fake phone calls and write down the guest problems and take care of the issues. It was super funny, but I feel like I grew up with that sort of entrepreneurship spirit. And then I'm like, well, being fourth generation, like, I've always thought as entrepreneurship as somebody who has created something like a new business, but kind of doing a little bit more research, it's typically the person that's handling the most risk, and they're managing the business, and they're problem solving, and they're leading the team. And so I feel like those are all things that I am definitely doing now. So I would say that I definitely have that in my blood, and that's kind of the lane that I believe that I've chosen.
For me, I never thought about entrepreneurship, never thought about either of it. Yeah, I just wanted to sing. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. I wanted to have albums out. I wanted to move to California and pursue entertainment in that regard and pursue music and being 100% in the music business. And my mindset at the time was being an artist that's signed to a record label and going on tour and all of those things. Technically, that is kind of, in a way, you're an entrepreneur because you're being signed to a label and you're building this catalog. But then you look at what artists like Beyonce have done, Taylor Swift, and so forth, where what they were able to do at a record label, they started so many businesses after that and because of it. So maybe entrepreneurship was always in my future. I don't know. But I do think that being an intrapreneur, to David's point, because he is one, he's an outstanding one. And I think any of us that own a company would want a David. Like, we'd have a bidding war over David. Okay. I feel an intrapreneur, I don't know how you could really scale without intrapreneurs, like for real scale and grow to a level that's outside of your direct region, city, and so forth, your neighborhood. If you want to go big, if you want to go beyond that, if you want to go multi-county, multi-city, maybe even national, you got to have entrepreneurs. Like, you have to. And I know I've been an entrepreneur in several companies along the way. So I have the mindset of, hey, here's a company. I want to see it go all the way. Whatever the company's goals are, if I'm believing in that and I feel it aligns with who I am and I like the product or whatever it is that they're selling, I can convince anybody to do the same. And that's how I've always been. But to be an entrepreneur now, man, it's definitely not for the weak. It's just not. So I think society sets you up more so to not own your own. Personally, I don't think anything is set up that way. I mean, in California, we pay federal, state, and city tax, which city tax is a new thing to us. So I'm like, dang, like, you guys are getting a piece of it. How can you make money if you're a new business? And there's all these certifications to be a small business, minority business, woman-owned business, disadvantaged business. And it's like, I'm still at a disadvantage because you ain't excusing there's no cuts. There's no tax cuts, breaks. There's no financial support, nowhere in that area. So I think it's really hard to be an entrepreneur, especially in these times. And then also where you live has even a greater effect. So I think society sets you up to work for somebody, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, because for every entrepreneur, you can have 10 entrepreneurs that are growing this major brand into something amazing. To all the entrepreneurs, we need you. You're special. You are chosen. If you're at a company, you are chosen to help us be the best brand that we can be. And if you're an entrepreneur, I feel you. Hang in there. Don't stop. Keep going. Because you're important as well, and we can't have entrepreneurs without entrepreneurs. We know we have a brand to build, so that's what we're choosing to do, and we know that from a spiritual component. And I don't know how people do it without it, but from our spiritual component, it's like, no, God, you gave us this company, so if it's your will, it's your bill. And we trust you to give us the clients, and we trust you to give us the business and the wisdom on how to get it. Because when it's hard, it's hard. When it's tough, it's tough. I know Jay can relate to that. I know Eric can relate to that. I know a lot of folks can relate to when you're starting out. Hence the percentages of businesses that don't make it past a certain time. And we're still here. We're going on 3 years of business. literally, we've been in business 3 years, and a lot has happened in a short amount of time. So we just gonna keep it going. And again, shout out to all the entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. We need each other. We need each other.
It's kind of tough going last because I want to just tell everybody, yes, I agree with what you said, and we can move on. But to be honest with you guys, I actually really am very excited to talk about this topic because for my own personal professional experience, the change between being an intrapreneur to being an entrepreneur is one that is very near and dear to my heart. If you're anything like me, you might hear a word, especially in business or in a professional realm, and you think to yourself, where did that word come from? And what even does that word mean? And who does it describe? So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about some of the history here because I think it's really interesting and I'm also kind of a nerd. So entrepreneur, which is the word that most people are probably more familiar with, was actually around in the 16th century, which is crazy to me. But it wasn't until the 18th century when an Irish-French economist wrote a book where he described an entrepreneur. And he described somebody who was buying things at uncertain prices or taking on risk and then selling things at certain prices to get a return on his investment. So he was essentially describing a risk taker. What's interesting is that the word entrepreneur comes from the French verb entreprendre, which means to take on. So it has this French origin of being a risk taker, right? So that is entrepreneur. When we start seeing intrapreneur, doesn't really happen until about 1978. So a little ways further on down the road. But there was a gentleman named Gifford and his wife Elizabeth, and Gifford went to both Harvard and Johns Hopkins. So a very well-educated man, and him and his wife wrote this paper where they described an internal entrepreneur. And they kind of coined the term intrapreneur. Intra is Latin for within. And obviously they just squish those two together. And then you have intrapreneur, which literally means like an entrepreneur that's inside of an organization, which I thought was really interesting. So that's kind of the history there. They also wrote a book in 1985 called Entrepreneurism, which you should definitely go check out if you're interested in this. But the most interesting thing for me is kind of realizing the way that they described it is that an intrapreneur is an entrepreneur. However, that person is utilizing those same skills within the safety of someone else's business. And by safety, I mean less risk. So to give you guys a little bit of background on my own personal journey, I worked for a lot of pest control companies and a few pest control companies in my time. And when I was doing that, it was always as an intrapreneur. I had a lot of marketing skills, I had a lot of sales skills, I had a lot of organizational development skills, and I was doing that with someone else's resources. They were betting their resources on my skills, my abilities, and I was getting them an ROI or a return on their investment. Eventually, I had an opportunity where I was going to take on more risk and I wanted to have my own return on investment. And so I risked my own assets. I risked my own money. And now what I'm doing is helping other intrapreneurs develop their skills, and I'm letting them risk my money to get an ROI. So that's the professional journey, if we can call it that, for me, and maybe for some of the other people within my organization. You start as an intrapreneur, where you are using the safety of someone else's business to develop your skills, and possibly at some point, you might become an entrepreneur, where you want to risk your own assets for your own ROI. Now, you might ask yourself, well, which one is better? You know, should I risk my own assets? Should I risk assets of someone else within the safety of their business? It kind of depends on what you're looking for and what you want your professional journey to provide for you. You've probably heard the phrase, the higher the risk, the higher the return, or where there's risk, there's a return, or, you know, low risk, low return, or risk reward, you name it. The idea there is that whoever is providing the risk is the person who's getting the return. Where there's less risk, there is feasibly less return. But it isn't linear, and it doesn't always work out that way. So, for example, I could have stayed in the same position that I was as an intrapreneur within another business, and honestly, I would have been happy. I would have been fine. I would have made really, really good money. I would have had a good retirement, and I would have probably been on my deathbed someday thinking this was great. Not a problem at all. But there are some additional benefits for being an entrepreneur versus being an intrapreneur. And one of those is that you are essentially your own boss, which means that you control your time, you control your calendar, you control your contribution level, and you control a little bit more of where that journey takes you. You are able to kind of chart the path on your own. Now, in the discussion here, the question comes up of what do we think society pushes more, intrapreneurism or entrepreneurism? And honestly, I'm not sure if most people know the difference or even know that there is an intrapreneur versus an entrepreneur. But I would say that with the increased risk, entrepreneurism looks fancy on the end. Right? When someone says they're an entrepreneur and they've already proven that they've made millions of dollars, they have fancy cars, nice houses, nice stuff, successful businesses, well, then you're pretty popular. In the beginning, when you say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I am quitting my job and I am going out on my own, there's not a whole lot of support there. In fact, a lot of people will tell you you're crazy and they'll say, why would you do that? Why would you risk that kind of money or assets, or why would you risk your time, or you had such a good thing going? Why would you make that risk? And it's something that not everybody understands. So do I think that society pushes entrepreneurism more than intrapreneurism? I think that society is a little bit more risk averse than your typical entrepreneur. And that usually comes to play until that entrepreneur is successful, in which case everybody says, oh, of course, he's a genius. I'm glad he made that decision. Well, you might not have made that decision yourself if you were in his shoes, right? So there is more safety in intrapreneurism. And I would guess that most parents, most grandparents, most friends, family members, whatever, when they see a successful person inside an organization and they can see that their path could make them very successful, they're probably going to say, hey, don't risk it, right? Don't roll the dice. You don't need to. But the decision on whether to make your professional journey one of an intrapreneur versus an entrepreneur, that's a very personal decision. So it's not something that everybody's going to get. And sometimes it doesn't really seem like it makes sense. And it might not make sense for years or decades even. But ultimately, if it makes sense to you, that's the only person who really needs to make sense too. So I'm kind of half and half on what society really pushes. And maybe I'm not really answering that question super directly, but I think that people want to believe in entrepreneurs. I think that society needs entrepreneurs. I think the visionary aspect of entrepreneurs is something that excites people, and it gets them invigorated with new ideas. But I think that people like the safety of an entrepreneur. I think that makes more sense to them logically. I think that represents more organization to them. So still not sure. I'm trying to convince myself right now, and I'm still not convinced on what society pushes more. But I think society is more closely affiliated to and resembles the intrapreneur versus the entrepreneur.